Well, I'll tell you a little secret about the way we build books. We don't make extra stuff.
Says the guy whose campaign setting got cut from the core book.
Here we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Siegfried Trent. I'm a game designer with Evil Genius Games, and we're here to celebrate the 20th anniversary of D20 Modern. So this is a game published by Wizards of the Coast 20 years ago, coming hot off the presses of the D20 craze, the third edition of our favorite fantasy role-playing game. D20 Modern was inspired by the action movie genre and near fantasy, such as like urban fantasy type settings and post-apocalyptic settings, but mostly kind of your Rambo type action movie, right? And it really represented a pretty new take on both the D20 system and on the modern genre, and became a real milestone for a lot of players who love to play spy games or action games or car chases and things like this. So we're really excited to be here with four of the key designers from the game, including its chief producer here. And so these fantastic gentlemen are going to talk with me, answer my questions about game design and the process of creating that game, and maybe tell some cool stories as well. Bill Slavik is with us here. Now, he is was the director of R&D for Dungeons and Dragons and RPGs at Wizards for 14 years. He oversaw the creation of 3rd and 4th edition D&D, D20 Star Wars, D20 Modern, Alternity, D&D, and Star Wars miniatures, and more than that. Bill's a very busy guy. Bill also wrote the Star Wars sourcebook for West End Games, 2 editions of A Guide to Star Wars Universe, and wrote Defining the Galaxy, celebrating 30 years of the Star Wars RPG. He currently serves as the lead writer for the Elder Scrolls Online. And with me also is Jeff Grubb. He's a designer for D20 Modern, also worked on the Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, Spelljammer, Guild Wars, Marvel Superheroes, and one of my favorite book trilogies, the Azure Bonds trilogy, which kind of got me into gaming to some degree. All right, Jeff is currently a narrative designer working in the field of computer games. Hey, Jeff.
Good to be here.
Next up, we have Rich Redmond, author and designer on D20 Modern, 3rd edition D&D Deities and Demigods, Monster Manual 2, Pathfinder, Codex Draconis, and a frequent author in Dragon Magazine. Welcome, Rich.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And last but certainly not least, we have Charles Ryan, another of our D20 designers for D20 Modern, also worked on D20 Apocalypse, something I quite enjoy, and the Babylon Project. Welcome, Charles. All right, so my first question to get things started is I want to know about the goals of creating D20 Modern. What was in mind when it was created? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about how it changed over time. And Bill, since you were lead on this project, maybe you could start about this.
Sure. Modern and science fiction gaming has always been near and dear to my heart from my days at West End and beyond. As much as I love fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons, the D20 system gave us an opportunity to go beyond just the traditional medieval fantasy. We first branched out with the Star Wars D20 game to test it and make sure that actually the D20 system could actually handle the types of places we wanted to go with it, and it certainly could. So then I resurrected some ideas from back in when I was first at TSR. I had originally pitched back in the day a Forgotten Realms that went into the future, and that was my first way to try to get Modern into D&D. That didn't go anywhere, but then we did Alternity, and a lot of what Alternity was, I won't say it influenced to some degree some of the things we did with D20 in general. Anyway, when I pitched the idea to the brand team, they were on board with it. And I gathered these fine gentlemen, and together we started throwing ideas around and trying to figure out how we wanted to approach it. I love cinematic role-playing. I think that's the sweet spot. That's the fun of a game if it has that cinematic feeling. So that's what we tried to go for, and that was my initial goals for the project.
Very cool. And, Charles, please.
Well, I was just going to point out, and I think the genesis of this was with Bill, is when you look at the class structure that was built for it, we looked at lots of different ways you could break up classes, and ultimately decided to put them around the ability scores with this idea that would create the most breadth to it, because ultimately it wasn't just modern, right? We went, it was the basis for true hard science fiction and science fantasy and a whole bunch of other stuff as well as modern. And that was all stuff we were thinking about from the very beginning.
Right. And to the point, traditionally in Dungeons and Dragons,
right.
Class was occupation, fighter, rogue, wizard, etc. Even in Star Wars, the D20 Star Wars, basically we were fitting into particular occupational slots and roles. What we managed to do when we went to D20 Modern is to broaden them out, tie them back into the basic abilities, the strong hero, the tough hero, etc.
And did you have any particular film properties or goals in mind that you like, we've got to be able to make this work in the game, or it's not quite there?
Well, certainly, if you look at the what did we call them? The settings that we set up for it, the campaign models, we wanted to make sure we hit all of those, and that included an urban fantasy, which is always something I liked a lot, and the Jim Butcher books were just becoming popular at the time, so we wanted to hit that. We wanted to make sure you could do Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We wanted to make sure you could use something like scanners with psionics and that kind of stuff. So all of that was in our heads. We each had our own. Jeff was in my playtest group, and we were doing urban fantasy, I think is what we were doing. Charles was doing the more apocalyptic stuff. So we wanted to hit it all. And that's why we packed the book with, what is this, 320 pages?
Pretty big tome.
It did grow.
I'm sorry. It's more than that. It's 380 pages. Yes, we spoke a lot on the topic. Yes.
Right.
I do believe we had to expand out the page count. I don't think that's where we started. So that is one of the things that did change as we went through the project. We kept finding things we wanted to say. For me, going back, there's a couple cases where I was trying to get a modern fantasy as well, and the image I always pushed was wizard on a motorcycle. A guy with biker leathers and the staff and everything, and that became one of the iconic characters in our game, Moondog. So that's just sort of like part of how it all evolves. I think we've all tried, and we see in the history of D&D several attempts to use modern weapons, bring characters into the modern age, send characters from the modern age into the fantasy past, and this just sort of like was a culmination of all of that growth over that year that's been percolating forever.
And so, was there anything that you ended up as you expanded the page count that didn't make the cut? Something that you kind of wanted to get into the game, but there just wasn't quite room for it?
Well, I'll tell you a little secret about the way we build books. We don't make extra stuff.
We try not to, though. Says the guy whose campaign setting got cut from the core book.
Here we go.
See, I don't remember that stuff. Go ahead, Rich.
No, and there's no hard feelings about that, right? There's only so much room in the book. You can only expand the page count so far, and in fact, the campaign setting that I wrote wound up going into, it was either Dragon or Polyhedron. Right? We don't, in the spirit of what Bill was saying, right? We don't waste things.
Right.
If it was good enough to go into a core rule book, but we just didn't have space, then we would publish it on the web, or we would publish it in one of the periodicals.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
For a while, we were overwriting specifically with the idea that we were going to basically turn it into a Dragon Magazine article, or to put it online. Rich, I'm going to follow up with you though. What was the missing campaign? What is the lost campaign? It
was a near future sort of biopunk campaign with a lot of acid rain and oceans rising, and a lot of genetic engineering going on.
Cool.
Okay. Wasn't that become? I believe it's called Gene Tech.
It might have, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of, I think that was a great time to just inspiration for new genres. Cyberpunk was on the rise, and it's very, it's many variations and that sort of thing become popular in the milieu. So
take something like the core engine of D&D and take it in a completely new direction. Like all the doors are open, right? There's so much you can do. And you mentioned all the different inspirations that came into it, and you could go in any of those directions. And as a result, there was I don't know, we put out, I don't know how many supplements for it, but they all, many, many different campaign settings. We were, as Rich said, cutting stuff from the book. Like, there was just so much you could do.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things is with the system that we devised, it proved to be extremely versatile. So we could go historical, we could go science fiction, we could go into other types of urban fantasy. We could basically provide the GMs with the tools they could use to build their own campaigns.
And one of the other driving factors from my point of view was finding ways to simplify the mechanics. The D&D D20 third edition, great game, great for its time, but was more complex than I had really hoped we were going to get to. And so with each D20 game that we did later, I tried to dial back that complexity at least a little bit.
All right. Yeah. So you mentioned gathering up this team together of these game designers. So tell me what that was like. Where'd you find these gentlemen, and how did you guys get involved in this project?
Well, we had a stable of a team, right? A big R&D department that I oversaw. So they were all part of that. Jeff in particular was my special projects guy. He worked with me on anything that showed up out of the blue that had to get done really quickly. Charles had just come over from Last Unicorn, I believe, at the time, and was serving as a designer editor on my squad, and Rich was a designer. I think it started with me and Jeff, as those things would normally do, and then I began to say, well, what else do we need to get this done? I think actually Charles was going to be an editor first, and then he just really wanted to play with the weapons and things like that. So we threw him onto the design team, and as well as Rich. And Rich has a story that I'd like to let him tell.
So one of the things that we had built off of Alternity was this sort of X-Files style game of modern urban legends and conspiracy called Dark Matter. And J.D. Weicker and I were just finishing up writing the Dark Matter Arms and Equipment Guide. And so obviously, if you're going to do a modern game, you need to have a chapter on modern equipment. And so Bill came over, and I remember Bill being a little apologetic about asking me to do the equipment and the guns and equipment for D20 Modern, because I had just done a whole book of that, and maybe I would be tired of it and want to do something else. And Bill was very respectful of that. But I was very excited to do D20 Modern, and basically to port. My starting point was porting over the Dark Matter Arms and Equipment Guide into full D20, and then sort of looking for the inspirations that we're doing, that we're leading into the game. What holes did the Dark Matter Arms and Equipment Guide have? What needed to be filled in to complete this? And then, thank goodness Charles came in, because I had written some super complicated and not necessarily super realistic firearm system, and Charles just streamlined the heck out of that. And what's in the book is definitely better than what I wrote. The book is better because Charles got involved as a designer.
Oh, thank you. I had actually, as Bill said, I don't know, when was this? 2001, maybe?
Yeah.
We were doing starting the design on it. And I had come, I'd been about a year since Wizards of the Coast had acquired Last Unicorn. But before that, I had been, in the indie game world, and I had run my own business for about, 8 or 9 years. And my flagship game was a modern, hardcore modern game system. So when we started talking about this, as Bill said, I was like, could I get involved in this? I have a little bit of that in my background.
Very cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and oddly enough, Charles and I had served at different times in the same National Guard division.
Oh.
Yes, it's true.
So we did have similar backgrounds, and we worked well together, I felt.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
Very cool.
And even though we gave Charles a design, he also did editing on the book along with Michelle Carter, who brought the whole book together for us and made it sing. Yeah.
Very nice.
Part of the interview process was bringing somebody into the interview who could pick a fight with me to see if I could defend myself without getting really angry.